Hey guys, this is Logan here with Hydra572. Today I want to talk about my 3 favorite knife companies. This was a pretty easy list to make for me because as I went through my collection I realized that there are some companies like Mora or Hogue that I really like their knives, but I only have 1 or 2 of them. And there are other companies that I just keep returning to. Whenever I have a little bit of money to spend on knives, I relatively regularly end up with one of these 3 brands. This isn't by intention. I didn't decide that I want to collect specifically from 3 different brands. In fact, I try a whole bunch of different brands so that I can have new and interesting reviews, and I like getting to things and reviewing them before everyone else on YouTube has. But I've found that there are 3 companies that I just keep returning to and buying a whole lot of their blades. The first company you see right here in front of you is Kai. That's Kershaw and Zero Tolerance. Now, it wasn't long ago, maybe a year and a half ago, that I didn't have any Kershaw or Zero Tolerance in my collection. And relatively quickly, I've accumulated quite a few. Now this is the most prominent brand in my collection. Like I said, through no intent of my own, this is just what I ended up with by buying cool blades that appealed to me. I think I can explain why relatively easily. Let's start down at the very affordable end with the Clash. Kershaw makes lots of really interesting, well-made blades for between $20 and $30, and that's a price tag that a whole lot of people who are new to the knife collecting habit or who just want to buy a nice knife for themselves to use can really wrap their head around. They can understand spending 20 to 30 bucks on something that they want to use. As you move into people who are a little bit more committed to the habit or people who want something that'll last them a little bit longer, something a little higher quality, they've wrapped their head around the idea of a knife as a useful EDC tool. They have really cool knives in the between $60 and $80 range, between $50 and $80 range. Here we have the Echelon and the Leek Blackwatch. 2 really cool blades, both needing to be reviewed soon. This is like the 3rd time I've filmed this goddamn video and I can't say the name of this blade, so from now on it's the Leek Blackwatch. So that's what that is. And moving on up from there, if you want to spend more money, if you're interested in having cool overbuilt blades, you have the sister within the Kai Corporation of Kershaw knives, the ZT knives. Zero Tolerance, you guys know these, I don't have to explain these to you, but these range in price all the way from like 100, 110, 120 bucks for a really cool 0200 that I can almost flip, but not from behind camera. Let's see. Got it. Really cool blade, overbuilt as hell, it feels awesome in your hand. A little bit more money, you can get the spring assist, a little bit smaller blade. What I'm getting at is no matter how much money you want to spend on a production knife, from down around 20 bucks, you can get something that's well made with a decent steel that'll perform for you, like the Clash. As you want to spend more, you get into nicer materials and even cooler design, and you just have this consistent feel all the way through the Kershaw brand of quality and good design, good materials. They're just all around good blades, and they've got a smattering of blades in every price range that you can choose from. And for that reason, through no real intent of my own, I've ended up with quite a few Kershaws, and I'm glad to have each and every one of them in my collection. In fact, I can only really think of a few negative things to say about Kershaw. The first one is that I've been waiting for like 5 months now for my pre-ordered Kershaw Emersons, which I hope are going to be really cool. And the second is that for 200 bucks, I really think that a titanium frame lock should have a steel lock bar insert. That's more a general industry quipe though. It's not something that I can really blame Kershaw for. Now, the brand that I have the second most knives from was king of my collection for a long time. Early on into my collecting career, I had quite a few Spydercos, for pretty much the same reason as I have a lot of Kershaws. These are just really well-made blades for reasonable prices, ranging up through 200, 250 bucks, where you might start thinking about really expensive production folders. We'll start down at the least expensive end again with the Spyderco Tenacious line, very famous here on YouTube for being excellent blades, workhorses for not a whole lot of money. I think if you shop around, you can get a Tenacious for a little under 40 bucks. And that's incredible with the design, materials, and quality that you're getting here. You could carry this knife every day for your whole life, and you'd have to sharpen it relatively frequently, but other than that, you would not have any complaints about this blade. For someone who's just interested in buying one knife and doesn't want to spend a whole lot of money, this knife makes a whole lot of sense. Same thing with the resilience. You guys know that I like the bigger blades. This was the first Spyderco that I had. It really sold me on the company. This is just a workhorse large EDC knife. You guys see the wave mod there. And this is just an incredible blade. I like mine better than I like the Tenacious. But very ergonomic feel in hand. The blade performs great. Excellent geometry for cutting. This leaf style blade that's very popular with Spyderco is just an excellent blade for EDC tasks. And as we discussed with Kershaw, as you move up and you want to spend a little bit more, we move into blades like the Centifonte 3, a little bit more expensive, but you get VG10, which is a nicer steel, and you get a little bit more elegant design. This thing feels even better in hand. It's a little bit smaller, still very capable at EDC work. Moving up just a little bit more, and the Native is really a special knife to me because for right around 50, 60 bucks, you're getting a premium steel. You're getting CPM S30V, which is an incredible steel. It stands up with the best that there are. And you get really cool design with the spear point and all of those sorts of things. Really good ergonomic fit in hand. Spyderco does have that thing with their blades where they give you a choil and you sort of have to get used to how to use that choil in combination with the handle. But once you get a feel for it, I think you guys will really enjoy the ergonomics on these blades. And then moving on up into the more expensive blades, one of the crown jewels of my collection, my Gentleman folder. The Volatin is just an incredible knife. Spyderco does very interesting collaborations with custom makers, just like Kershaw does with Emerson and others as well, Ken Onion, and I believe they've done some work with Strider. I don't want to be quoted on that though. Anyway, back to Spyderco. These are just incredible blades for pretty much the same reasons. They have a different theme, I would say, overall in terms of ergonomics and how they do their hardware. All those sorts of things are different, but comparable in terms of quality and overall execution. These are also really great blades. So there are the positives, like I said, consistent design, quality, materials, all those sorts of things that you need to sell me a knife. The only negatives that I can really think of are Spyderco has this weird tendency to compete against their more expensive blades with their less expensive blades. So take the Endura and Delica, both reviewed already. I would take the Centifonte 3 over either of them easy, and their price is very comparable. And I would take the Native 5 absolutely, and this is only a little bit more expensive than a Delica. It's the same size. They have lots of blades that compete with each other because they know what market they want to compete in. They want knives in about this size range in the $50 to $150 range is, I'd say, what Spyderco most wants to sell, and they just compete with themselves a lot in that bracket. Early on, I was saying things like, if you can get a Resilience, why would you want a military? But I'm not really saying that anymore. I'm saying if you can get a Resilience, why would you want an Endura? Why would you want one of their $50, $60, $70 blades that doesn't have quite the original design elements of something like a Native, definitely not like a Volatin? They just compete with themselves a lot. It makes it hard to want to own every knife in Spyderco's lineup. You're more going to tend toward just picking a couple that are aesthetically appealing to you and going and seeking those out. In addition to that, the more expensive Spydercos that I've owned, my Volatin is the only one with lock slip. And that's a little bit concerning to have the expensive ones be the ones with quality control issues. The edge on this also wasn't incredible, which is what I've heard from others as well that have owned Volatins. And that's a little bit of a bummer because those are two things that Spyderco typically does very well. Even on their budget-oriented blades, they have pretty minimal blade play. And they come with incredible edges. That's another thing that you need quality-wise to sell me a knife very consistently, is your stock edge geometry has to be very good. And Spyderco's typically is. They're still a standout company in my mind, absolutely one of the best knife companies that there is, and I'm looking to add more expensive Spydercos to my collection here in the near future so that I can really hopefully get over that hump of having expensive Spydercos not come out perfect. But still, Spyderco, glad to have them in my collection. Excellent blades, get carried very frequently. So my first two choices were pretty uncontroversial. I mean, Spyderco and Kershaw. Who doesn't love Spyderco and Kershaw? Everyone has basically accepted that they're great makers who make blades that really appeal to a large part of the YouTube audience. My third choice is a little bit more controversial. Yeah, it's Cold Steel. I unabashedly love my Cold Steel blades. For some reason, Cold Steel is sort of dismissed as a brand within the knife community. I think it has something to do with the perception created by Lynn Thompson and the proof DVDs, all of those tests that they do on their blades. And sorry, I just love that stuff. I think if you're going to deny the use of a large blade as a weapon and as a defensive tool, you're really crippling yourself when you're looking at the knife market. You're crippling your ability to prepare yourself. And I don't think that's a positive thing. I think people think that it's sort of juvenile, but I think those tests are really representative of what the blades can do. In fact, I've emulated those tests before, and it was a whole lot of fun. Moving on to the knives themselves, however, I love Cold Steel because they have an incredible locking mechanism. Their steel is by far good enough, and they've really keyed in on the hyper small and hyper large sides of the market. What am I talking about? The Mini Tub Flight is one of the best small knives I've ever handled. In fact, I'll say it's the best small knife I've ever handled. I want to buy a couple more Kershaw Scallions here in the near future so that I can compare them, but I just love this blade for a really small, really light knife that I can clip outside my pocket and just have it with me. It weighs nothing, and it just works for me as an EDC blade. Costs nothing, weighs nothing. For someone who wants something unobtrusive, this is about as good as it gets. I'm afraid that they're discontinuing the colored handles, but the Mini Tough Light will be around with the black side tail handles for time immemorial, I hope. This is an excellent blade. If I got word that they were discontinuing the whole line, I'd have to buy 10 of them. Moving on to the hyper large end, still at a very, very understandable price, here we have the Cold Steel Voyager, a monster of a knife. If you're going to defend yourself with a folding knife, I think you want a huge knife with a triad lock. We can talk about the triad lock here in a minute. We've talked about it before. Just for all intents and purposes, it's an exceptionally strong backlock that allows you to perform feats with these knives that you couldn't perform with a knife with a liner lock, frame lock, or even a traditional rock lock. But these are incredibly large knives that are very, very cheap. I think of them sort of like Glocks in terms of they're very cheap, very utilitarian design, but they just work. I've tested, abused this thing, I've carried it quite a bit, and it has not let me down even in the slightest. For $60, $50 if you shop around, that is a monster hunk of steel, and it's done with very good quality. Like I said, I think if you're going to avoid using your knives as weapons, if you're going to avoid thinking about the propensity to use a knife as a weapon, the only person I think you're hurting is yourself in terms of how you prepare for conflict. I think if you're going to carry a knife, you should think about whether you would use it if you had to. Moving on up a little bit more expensive, we have some more mid-sized knives like the Cold Steel AK-47. This was my first high-quality knife. First thing that I had that wasn't like a Gerber. And this knife was incredible. It came with a whittlingly sharp edge. I was popping hairs off my arms for quite a long time, and I bashed on this lock mechanism, I bashed on this knife, bent the hell out of the impact device there on the end, and I just used and abused this blade, and it has not let me down. This is an excellent blade. And moving on to the even more expensive, we can get into a little bit more fanciful design with like the Cold Steel Espada. These are the blades that I really love from Cold Steel. They're hyper large and hyper small blades. I like my AK-47 as well. Positive things about Cold Steel, like I said, that really, really strong Andrew Demko designed triad lock. The basic secret behind it is you can absorb a lot of force by putting in the frame of the knife a stop pin for the back lock to impart force to. And just really cool design with a lot of large blades. And the company is unabashed about saying, look, God forbid you have to defend yourself. God forbid if you do have to defend yourself, it's with a folding knife. But if you do have to defend yourself with a folding knife, be really honest. Do you want this blade or do you want that blade? If someone that really means you harm is coming towards you, do you want this knife in your hands or this knife in your hands? And there are all sorts of people that think that carrying a knife that large is ridiculous, that think that you would never need anything bigger than a Resilience. People say the Resilience is ludicrous in size. I would have to disagree. As someone who's legally not permitted to carry a firearm to protect myself, I think that having a blade this large is a real boon to my self-defense. If I ever had to use it to defend myself or someone else, I would want something like that on my side. And so yeah, I love Cold Steel. I really like their small blades. I really love their large blades. In terms of complaints about the company, the only thing that I can really think of is I would love to be able to spend $150 on something in this size range that had a better steel and a triad lock. AUS 8 is not a bad steel. I've tested it before and shown its capabilities, and it does damn good, and it's easy enough to sharpen. But it is a budget-concerned steel. I don't think you put AUS 8 in a knife if you're really wanting to spend a whole lot of money on a blade. If you're going to spend $200, you want 154 cm, S30V, D2. You guys know the steels that make the more expensive knives. And I would like to spend a little bit more money on a Cold Steel and have some more steel options. AUS 8 is a great steel. They've implemented it in most of their blades. Some of their fixed blades come in different steels. I would like that option in more of the mid-range size knives. I don't want to spend $400 on a knife like this that's got D2 or that's got 154 cm, but I would be willing to spend $150 on a knife that's more in this price range. I'm not going to be using this for EDC usage. It's going to be used for defensive usage mostly, so it's got to cut one bad guy once if I use it. And so that's the reality of it. Aus 8 is a great steel for that application, and it would do just fine at usage as well. But I'd like to have this blade with 154 cm. That would just be my personal preference. I think people are dismissive of Aus 8, I think they're dismissive of cold steel, and I think it's really unwarranted. So I guess this is my controversial choice. Cold steel's sort of left out of the discussion of knives. There's all of the Spyderco versus Benchmade, all that sort of thing. I think they're incredible. I think if you try one of their large blades, you might really like it. I think if you're going to carry a firearm, you should have a plan for what you're going to do if that doesn't go well. Anyways, that's just my 2 cents. Those are my 3 favorite brands as determined by what knives I have in my collection. Goes Kershaw, Spyderco, and Cold Steel. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video and the discussion. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more of the same.